going to record our meeting tonight. Just to make sure that we have a recording that we can share with other educators, and this will be a resource also to organization. Before we begin our meeting officially, I would like to invite my colleague Margaret. I am also aware that we are hosting these webinars in collaboration with the Teacher Service Commission and particularly with the Regional Director TSC, Dr. Maligat. He'll be joining us tonight. I hope he is with us. We also have other officers from the Teacher Service Commission, especially from Voi and Embu and Machakos. And we also appreciate the leadership of the Kenya Secondary Heads Association, especially here in Nairobi County, led by Madam Beatrice. We are grateful that we are having this training as a collaboration with various stakeholders and also with research scientists who are based at the University of Missouri in St. Louis. And so we are going to formally invite Margaret, who will usher in Dr. Maligat, if he's with us right now, to give a welcoming remark. Margaret.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Kingori. My name is Margaret Kiprono from the Center for Character and Leadership, and I also work with Teacher Service Commission, Machakos County. Now, so I would really want to welcome each and every one of you to this session where we are focusing on weaving empathy into our teaching and learning environments. So without taking much time, I would really want to invite Dr. Marigat, who is the Regional Director of Education, Nairobi County. He is a Chief Empathy Officer, so we are really privileged to have him. So welcome, sir, to address the forum. Dr. Marigat. Okay, so maybe he will say he will actually join in. So we'll give him time, maybe later. So back to you, Mr. Kingori, so that we can continue as we wait for him to join in.
Thank you so much, Margaret, as we wait for Dr. Marigat to join in, perhaps maybe towards the end of the meeting, but I'm sure he'll be able to join us today. I'll take this opportunity also to recognize our collaborators, particularly Dr. Melida and Deborah from the Center for Character and Citizenship at the University of Missouri, and also Dr. Vishalis from the University of Malaysia. Our topic tonight is called Creating a Culture Where Everyone Grows. Every educator is a chief empathy officer, and our facilitator tonight is Dr. Thomas. Dr. Thomas is a scholar. He used to be a former principal, but he is a researcher on areas of education and also in emotional intelligence. He's an author of several books, including the title of our tonight's presentation, Creating a Culture Where Everyone Grows. Every educator is a chief empathy officer. And so tonight, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Dr. Thomas to share his wisdom and presentation with us. Welcome so much, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you. It is wonderful to be here. I'm excited to learn with you. And let me know whenever you're ready so I can share my screen with my PowerPoint.
Yes, we are ready. Now you can please go ahead and share your screen.
looking to share my screen here. Share, all right. So, can you all see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so Peter, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and begin. Shall I start?
Yes, we are ready. Please go ahead. It's your
Good.
time now. You have 90 minutes to make the presentation.
Good, thank you. Welcome, everyone. You've heard this is the title. At the bottom here, you will see my website. And my last slide I will show you has my email address and my website. And I do that because I would welcome any questions or comments you have subsequently. It may be next week, next month, next year, and you could send me an email and say, what about, or what do you think, or why, or can you tell me? And I would be happy to help you. I'm only going to be with you for an hour and a half or so today, but I'm going to be on your side. So please reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm not with you, obviously, but I will be trying to get some participation by having you do some comments in our chat box. So let me go ahead and begin here. So as you see, I want to thank you for letting me share my thoughts. But I want to apologize too for two reasons. The first one is I'm in the middle of the United States. I've not been to your countries. I don't know you. And so it may be some of the things I say are less applicable, or it really wouldn't work for you. You're the expert in your school. So please listen to what I say, think about whether or not it would work. But if it doesn't, I trust your judgment. And I apologize if I'm suggesting something that doesn't work for you. The other apology that I give is that I'm going to be going too fast today, too quickly. I know that, but that's just the way it is. The presentation that you will see and hear today often is a half day. Sometimes I go to conferences or schools and I will spend a whole day on this. When I do that, I provide lots of time for the people in the room to sit and share, to talk with one another. That can't happen today. So thank you and my apologies. That is me, a better view. You heard me to introduce and mention the books. On your screen, The Chief Empathy Officer, that's the book from which I will be working now. My previous two books were The Formative Five and Taking Social Emotional Learning School-Wide. The Formative Five, as you can see in the middle, the case I made there is that children need to learn to read, write, and calculate. Absolutely. Scholastics are terribly important for sure, but they should be the floor, not the ceiling. What we really need to do is educate our children to be good people, to be good citizens, to be good neighbors. I'm going to be talking a lot about social emotional learning in this presentation, which ties to character, as you know. And in the Formative Five, as you can see from the cover, I set out 5 social emotional learning, what I call success skills. I talked about empathy, self-control, integrity, embracing diversity, and grit. That book came out in 2017, and I'm excited that the publisher, ASCD, has asked me to do a revised version, second edition, and that will be published in February or March of 2027. I've updated what I said. I talked about COVID, how we're responding to that. I talk a bit about AI. And in addition to my 5 success skills that I've noted, I added curiosity. So that's just so you know a bit about who I am. So on the chat box, in the chat box, what I'd like you to do, give me a word or two. How are you feeling and how has your day gone? No, I'm not seeing anything in the chat box. are things there that I cannot see? Peter, would you enter something in the chat box so I can tell if it will show on my screen? There we go. Okay. I'm seeing down at the bottom. Good. All right. Good. I'd like to hear from everybody how it's going. How's your day? Feeling good? Excellent. Excellent. Good. Good. Lots of positives, but if you didn't have a good day, tell us that too. Good, good. Excellent. Good. One more moment and I'll go back to my presentation. So there was a comment there. Somebody said busy. We were all busy. And I'll address that in a bit. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to wait about 30 seconds and then I'll come back. All right. So you can see my screen again. Let me tell you, Peter nicely introduced me. Let me give you a bit more information though, so maybe you'll know where I'm coming from. And I'm going to talk about my biases in a minute. You need to know that I led schools for 37 years. I was a public school principal. I was a private school headmaster. And so I have many, many years of leading schools. Another way to look at that is I've made lots of mistakes. That's inevitable. That's part of the job. And what I tried to do is learn from my mistakes. Today, everything that I talk about needs to be embraced within the spirit of intentionality and transparency. If you like what I say, if it makes sense to you, if you think it's going to work for you, when you go back to your school, I want you to think about how to present that. Intentionality and transparency, and you'll hear that again. Intentionality simply means you decide to do it, absolutely. Transparency means you share with other people what you've learned. I'm going to be talking about empathy and leadership. If you think this applies to you, if you think this would work with you, do not do it by yourself. You need to go back and talk to others, whether it's your whole staff, whether it's an assistant, whether it's a few people, and say to them, I heard the speaker talking about empathy. Talk about what I said with them. Let them know what you're doing. Later on, I've got a slide, and I talk about how to develop your empathy. One of the things I say is use the vocabulary. You need to use the word empathy a lot with your staff, with your students' parents, with your students, with everybody, so they know what you believe and what you are doing. So to help others know what they need, I've got two slides here. I did these this morning. This is something that I've really gotten into. I've been reading a lot about students who are underachieving. And one of the things students who are underachieving, who are not doing well, need to know, they need to be known. They need to know that the school knows them. They need to know their efforts matter, that they can succeed, and they recognize the work is important. That's not a revelation. That doesn't surprise us. If I had asked you that, chances are you would have known. What I've done, though, and I did this last week, I'm doing it now. I've got a presentation next week, and I'll do it then again, is I'm working from what students need, and I'm saying, well, wait a second, what do teachers need? What can we do to help teachers know what they need? Take a second and look at this list. I believe that if teachers are going to be effective, they need to know three things. And our job as principals is to help them know that. The first thing is they need to be known and valued. They need to know that we understand them, that we respect them. We know them more than just a name in a classroom. We know who they are as a person. That takes time, that requires empathy, but they need to be known and valued. Number two, they need to know that they are learners. I've not been to any of your schools, but I will guarantee you that however good your teachers are now, July, June 2026, they need to be better in June and July 2027. The world is changing. Our job is not only to help our teachers teach our students, our job is to help our teachers learn. And then the third thing is they need to know they can succeed. In the United States, it's really difficult to be a teacher. I'm sure that's true in Africa as well, because no matter how hard we try, all of our students never do what we want. It's too easy then for teachers to blame themselves and think they're the problem. What we need to help them understand is they're part of the solution. By learning more, that's the second point, they can then succeed, the third point. Today's focus is creating a culture where everyone goes, every educator is a chief empathy officer. When you read the business books, when you read the business magazines, they talk about a CEO being a chief executive officer. My CEO, you, is a chief empathy officer. So today I'm going to talk about culture. I'm going to talk about empathy, and then I'm going to have probably several strategies that maybe you will be able to use in your school, very specific kinds of things. And as you recall, when I began, I talked about my email address and my website. If you do that, I would love to hear from you. If you succeed, I would be delighted for you to tell me what happened. If it didn't work, I'd be delighted for you to tell me what happened. We're all in this together. All right, I'm going to begin by talking about problem solving, because basically today we're going to solve problems, but your job is about solving a problem. If you were a school leader, every day when you walk in the door, you're faced with problems. Sometimes those problems have numbers, sometimes they're people, sometimes it's the building. Google looked at problem solving. They did this a decade ago because what they noticed was that at Google, some teams of people worked really well, were very effective. Other teams were not as effective. So being Google, they began by saying, wow, why is this? What's the difference in the team? So the first thing they did is they looked at education, they looked at degrees, they looked at grade point average. None of that really was a determining factor. The best teams didn't have the most degrees, didn't have the highest grades. So they came back and they looked again. What they came back with is how groups are effective. And again, I don't know your schools, but I will guarantee you work in groups, whether it's you working with staff members, whether it's staff members working together. In schools, we need to work collectively in groups. So what did Google find? Who matters on a team is less important than how the team members interact, structure their work, and view their contributions. Okay, think about that for a second. It's less important who's sitting around the table, and it's more important how they work together, how they interact. Some specifics. The first one, and this is really hard. What that means is that if you've got 6 people at a table, it doesn't matter who's in charge. All 6 people need to be talking about the same amount of time. That does not mean that every person needs to be 16%. What it does mean is nobody should be 30 and nobody should be 5. Even if you're the principal, even if you're the person who's chairing the meeting, you should not be talking that much more than everybody else. Friends, let me tell you, this is really hard for me. I read this and I started doing it at work when I was being a principal. It was really hard. Tom Herr, I chair the meeting, I'm the principal. I'm in charge. I think I've got lots of good ideas. But what I realize is that even if my ideas are the best, and we'll come back to this in a bit, even if they're the best, everybody needs to participate. So the next time you're at a meeting, whether you're in charge or not, what I'd like you to do is just look at people and think and listen. How often are people talking? Is the participation shared? Now, if you've got 100 people, that's not going to work. Even if you've got 20, though, it can't be that 3 people talk half the time. So that's number one. Now, going back, remember I talked about transparency? When I read this, I shared this with my faculty. And I said to them, I want you to work on this when you are in meetings with your colleagues, with your peers. Tom Herr, I'm going to share this because I'm going to do it with you. Once my teachers knew that I was going to be participating in equal amount, I was going to try to do that, they understood its value. They could see times when I wanted to talk and I didn't. And that was a way of modeling for them what they should be doing. Second thing, that ties into the first. So Tom and Mindy and Peter are at a meeting. Even though it's my meeting, everybody recognizes the importance of participation. So I'm in charge of the meeting and I'm leading it. Mindy might interrupt me and say, excuse me, Dr. Herr, Peter hasn't said anything, and it looked like he was going to make a comment earlier. Well, that's great. I was in charge of the meeting. I didn't see Peter trying to talk. Mindy recognized that even though she's not the chair, even though she's not the principal, part of her responsibility is ensuring that the meeting do well. Number 3, intentionality, transparency. Talk about this, what this looks like. Relatedly, problem solving is more than just solving problems. Now, this next portion may be a surprise to you. It was to me. My last book, The Principal as Chief Empathy Officer, I had this in there. It's in there. And I talked to a principal who read the book, and initially he really disagreed. He said, I don't think that's right. So let me go through it with you, and then I'll talk about it. Too often we think if we've got a problem and we solve it, we're successful. That's all we need to do. Tom Herr, I'm saying, wait a minute, there's more than just solving the problem. Number 1, take a second and read that, please. That's number 1, because you have to solve the problem. I do not want you to think that if you do the second and third goal, the first one doesn't matter. You've got to solve the problem, but that's not the only thing you need to do. Number 2, in addition to solving the problem, so this was what my friend, the principal, was really bothered by. And let me push you. If we were in a room, I'd have you together in groups talking about it because I think this is really, really important. I'm going to talk about me. I want to change something at my school. I want to work on student attendance, for example, or student discipline. So I convene a group and I've got my idea. Well, because it's my idea, of course, I think it's the right idea. If you ask me to rate it on a 1 to 10 scale, of course, I would say it's a 10. Well, guess what? Other people have other ideas. And this is what I'm going to say that really bothered my friend, although he came around. My idea is a 10. I can see Peter on my screen, so I'm going to pick on him. My idea is a 10. Peter comes into the meeting. He's got another idea, another way of looking at it, another strategy. I might think it's an 8 or a 9. So we talk about it, the group talks about it. If the group has a different idea, I'm better to go with their idea, even if I think mine is better, because if I go with their idea, they're going to have a buy-in, they're going to be enthusiastic, they're much more likely to implement it correctly. Now, the 1 to 10 is there because, whoops, let me back up, because if their idea is a 6 or a 7, no, we're going to keep talking, we're going to find something. My job as the leader, as the principal, is to lead the group to a decision that we can all be excited about. It might be my 8, but it might be your 9 and somebody else's 10. What I do not want to do is make the decision because it's my 10, I really like it, and other people are less enthusiastic. Too often in organizations, we do not do this. I was guilty of it. I read a lot. I would come in with an idea, and I just knew that my idea was the right thing. Well, even if it was the right thing, other people didn't own it. They were doing it because it was Tom's idea. It would be much, much, much better if I came in with my idea and said, let's talk about it. And we talked and we came to a conclusion. We had a consensus with which we were all agreement. Now, again, if it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I'm not ready to get off this. But your 8, your 9, my 10, we can do that together. Third goal, everyone grows. Please read that. Now, if you go back to my first slide, you've got to solve the problem, but that's not sufficient. If you are leading from a perspective of empathy, if you're leading because you want other people to grow, because you care about them, then that needs to be part of the equation. If you solve the problem, but it was only your solution, if you solve the problem and other people weren't really involved, if you solve the problem and they didn't grow while you solve the problem, you haven't helped the institution. You can solve problem after problem after problem after problem, but the institution never grows, never flourishes. For the institution to grow and flourish, people need to grow too. And that comes from how you define solving a problem. My goal of this committee is not just to solve the problem. I could do that by my desk, by myself. The goal is to help all of us grow. Okay. So I want you to think right now just to yourself. I'm not going to ask you to do anything, but here's the 3 areas. And what I want you to do is think about how you would allocate your 10 points. Maybe before today, you would have put all 10 in problem solved. Maybe today you'll do 4, 3, and 3, 8, 1, 1. Again, I'm not asking you to respond, but what I want you to do is think about that. I, Tom Herr, believe that you need to have a 4, 3, 3. And, you know, I would probably put my 4 in problem solved. You might, depending upon your school, think it needs to be in everybody grows. I can't imagine that you wouldn't want to have positive interactions. But that's where the transparency comes in. If you really believe this, if this excites you, if you think, wow, this fits me great, then what I suggest you do is go back to your school, start with a small group, not the whole faculty, not the whole staff. Share this with them and say, what do you think? Let's talk about it so that you're not doing it alone. That you have other people who are moving with you. All right. What's culture? I talked about culture and empathy. I'm now going to talk about culture. Here's 2 formal definitions. Please read those. Next, here is Tom Herr's definition. The beliefs, assumptions, and actions which determine behavior. Culture isn't just thinking, feeling, it's doing. These photos, by the way, all the photos that you will see today are from my school. That's me at the bottom right. We had a group of educators coming from Iceland. They came to our school for a week, and I was talking to them about how our school works. But it's, again, culture determines what people do. Roland Barth, he agrees. Jim Collins, whatever the culture in your school is, you're the key factor in determining that culture. And you can change it. If you think it's wonderful, great. Tom Herr would say, even if it's wonderful, it can get better. But maybe it's not what you want. Well, hopefully today I'm going to give you some ways to get your hands around that and change it. Again, that's me and some of my staff members in front of our school. Note what I've got underlined. Gets everyone to buy in. Everyone needs to know that they're part of a team. Culture starts at the top. Great quote by Daniel Goleman. Please read that. The last sentence there, or last part of that sentence, is really important because he talks about how you measure objectives. In schools in the United States and schools in Africa, I know we live and die by test scores. And Tom Herr, am going to say, if I go back to the formative 5, that's not the only answer. Children do need to do well in reading, writing, calculating. Absolutely. 5 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have said they also need to develop their character and social emotional learning. Today, artificial intelligence is on our doorstep. No, that's wrong. It's inside the school already. It's inside homes. What that means is that while children need to still do well scholastically, they need to focus even more on the things that AI cannot do. That's ethical considerations, that's character, being a good person, working with others, having empathy. Everything communicates culture. Read that. Atul Gawande wrote a book, and basically he talked about surgical teams. And in the United States, probably in Africa, there are always often different surgical teams. You come in at 8 o'clock in the morning for a surgery and you have 6 or 7 people around you. You come in the next day, somebody else says, it's a different team. They don't always work together. Gawande talks about how in the surgical room, the surgeon is the star. The nurse, the anesthesiologist, all the other people do what the surgeon says. The surgeon is the king or the queen. In his book, however, Gawande talked about some surgeons who really wanted to have the team work effectively. So they did a little bitty thing. Before the surgery, before the patient came in, the surgeon pulled down his mask and said to the team, "Hi, I'm Tom Herr." And everybody went around and introduced themselves, pulling their mask down, saying their names. It's a little bitty thing, but what that did was change the hierarchy. It enabled nurses, anesthesiologists, assistants to say, hold on, Dr. So-and-so, what about, or you forgot, or why? All of a sudden, everybody became part of the problem solving, not just the assistants to the surgeon. That little act, pulling down the mask, saying their name, caused a 35% reduction in surgery. Now, you're not a surgeon. I don't know your school, but it may be that at your school, the hierarchy is so strong that the people around you are unable to give you the feedback or input you need. Think about that. Today, I won't talk about surveys. I do presentations on surveys. That's a good way to do that to reduce the hierarchy. Second example. When and about what do you provide feedback? What you say to teachers, what you tell them about their performance determines the culture. When's the last time you went up to a teacher and talked and said, hey, I know you didn't succeed, but nice try? When's the last time you said, wow, I know this is difficult. I'm happy to sit with you and talk about it. When's the last time that you said to a teacher, wow, this class didn't do as well as we wanted. What do you think happened? Those are small comments, but they say a lot about you and your empathy. How do your teachers know they value them and know you value them? At New City School, one of the things we did is we celebrated teacher longevity. Every year we would end with a school picnic. And at that picnic, staff members, not just teachers, staff members who'd been with us 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, we called them up, we applauded. They got a little pin, a Griffin pin. That was our mascot. Before that, if I knew that Mary Jones was going to be celebrating 10 years and Fred Smith was going to be celebrating 15 or whatever, I would send an email to the staff and I'd say, give me some comments about Mary and Fred. And then when I would call Mary up to give her her pin, I would read the positive comments about her from her peers. The teachers were embarrassed. They loved it. It's a little way of saying to them, you're valued. The school that I led, I live in the neighborhood. I live about 5 minutes from my school by car. And I would often be at a filling station, a restaurant, the grocery store, and a child's parents would come up to me and they would say, oh, Dr. Herr, we just love New City School. We think the school is great. And I thanked them. But I knew that really wasn't accurate. They didn't love the school. The school was a bunch of buildings. They didn't love me. They didn't love the curriculum. What they loved is that their child had a great teacher, followed by a wonderful teacher, followed by a superb teacher. When that happened, they loved the school. So our job as principals is to help people grow and learn and to be empathic. Excuse me. Peter, I just noticed on this screen, what I'm doing right now, I cannot see chats. So if somebody sends a chat with a question that I should know, would you please interrupt me and tell me? Thank you.
I'll definitely let you know. Please go on.
Great. All right. What is empathy? There it is. The next slide is the same, but you see that I've underlined, I've highlighted in red some words. That's what you do. Empathy isn't just a feeling, it's taking action. The last word, doing, is bold. Empathy fits within, this is Castle's social emotional learning circle. You may well be familiar with it. What I like about it, it's got some concentric circles. What's great is that the first circle out, you see classrooms, the schools, and then homes and communities. So when we talk about social emotional learning, certainly we do it in classrooms, certainly we do it in schools, but we also need to get our communities to buy in. That's not easy. I won't have time today, but I've talked about that too. If you look here at the 5 little cells in the middle, you see the top 2, self-awareness, self-management. That's what Howard Gardner and I call intrapersonal intelligence. If you look at the greens, social awareness, relationship skills, that's what Gardner and I call interpersonal intelligence. Those come together and give you responsible decision making. Empathy is built in all of that. Part of social awareness, relationship, self-awareness, and self-management. So if you are an empathic leader, if you develop empathy in your students and in their teachers, all of a sudden social emotional learning progresses. In a school framed by empathy, I'll let you read that. That's a photo, by the way, of me in the summer and some of our students standing in front of the building. Self-explanatory, but the last bullet The first word is powerful, every. I'm talking to school leaders. I'm talking to you about teachers. That's my mistake, because what I should be talking about is not just teachers, but every adult in your building. If you have people who drive buses, do security, work in the cafeteria, secretaries, whatever, everybody in your school needs to be thinking about how they can express empathy to students and to one another. When I talk about empathy, there are some pushbacks. People will say, yes, but empathy clouds judgment. To that, I say, you know, that's okay. It does, but I'd rather have people who are more empathic than less. The second one, empathy is inert. It's just a feeling. The definition that I gave shows you that's not the case. And here's two quotes that support that. I'll give you a second to read those, please. So again, an empathic leader doesn't just feel differently, doesn't just think differently. She acts differently. He does things differently. All right, as we've been talking about empathy, let me come more specifically and talk about you as a school leader. Read that question. And again, if we were together, if we had more time, I'd ask you to talk and think about it. So I want you to just think about it for a second, all right? Now, I did a study. The study was done in the United States and Missouri. We're right in the middle of the country on the Mississippi. I'm not sure that it applies to you and your school. My guess is it does, because people are people and they all have feelings. But let me run through this and show you. Read that. About an administrator that you respect and those positive qualities. So I asked them to think about that, and then I aggregated their data. The responses that they gave in terms of actions, they talked about managerial, relational, and instructional. That's probably not a surprise. If I had asked you what areas you think they are, we probably would have generated those, okay? Not a surprise. However, what was a surprise is that 9 people said instructional, 3 said manager, 9 said managerial, 3 said instructional, 25 said relational. I was blown away. Tom Herr, thought the overwhelming majority would be instructional. I know how much teachers, and this was not my school, did this at the university. I know how much teachers want kids to learn, so I figured they would want a principal who would help them be better teachers, who would help them work on pedagogy and curriculum. Wrong. They wanted teachers, they wanted principals who were strong managerially. That makes sense. They wanted schedules to work. They wanted the day to go smoothly. But I was stunned by how many said relational. Take a second. These are the positive thoughts. So instructional, this is what they said. Managerial, that's what they said. Now, Tom Herr, I'm going to say to you that if you don't do the managerial, you've probably got a problem. If the school isn't running well, if there's a problem, people are going to be unhappy. Okay. So instructional managerial, check out what they said, however, about relational. Take a moment and read those, please. Those are powerful comments. A couple threads. And again, if I was physically with you in Africa, I'd put you in groups and I'd have you really analyze this and dissect it. But I'm going to do it right now. So a couple things come through. One is listening, and I'm going to talk about that a little later. And the other is caring. That's what teachers want. And if you go back to way early on, when I talked about our job, teachers need to feel known and appreciated, absolutely. They need to know they're learners, absolutely. They need to know they can succeed. That's what comes through here. Now, my guess is, if I was looking at you and I said that last statement, people, regardless of their age, need to know that we understand and care for them. I suspect every one of you would nod in agreement. Excuse me. Nobody's going to say no. The problem, though, is how do they know that? What are we doing? So I'm going to come to some strategies. Let me throw out one thing right now. Again, I led schools for 37 years. The one problem you have, the problem I have, is time. I don't know how many hours you work during the day. I don't know what time you get to work and leave. My bet is you're there longer than you would like to be. My bet is when you go home, you have more to do than you want to do. It's certainly true for me. So what I'm talking about are things you need to do that maybe you're not doing. And that doesn't happen free. You've got to devote the time to it. So when I talk about these empathy strategies, I recognize that I'm asking you to probably do something you're not doing, or to take more time doing it than you're doing. I'm going to say to you, though, it's an investment, and it will pay off. Education is about relationship. Empathy is integral to relationships. There are 4 components to empathy, and I think it helps to know these. When we teach these empathy to kids, we teach these steps. Cognitive empathy, we all get that. That's knowing how other people think and feel, whether that's somebody who is a different race, gender, lives in a different country, different age, different educational level. We think we know how they think and feel. Emotional empathy is when we take the time to really understand how they feel, because we've done more than just think. We've asked, we've listened, we understand. Actionable empathy is what I talked about a few slides ago. That's when you're actually doing. You're not just understanding, you're not just feeling, you're taking action. And then the 4th level of empathy, which I invented, is radical empathy. And that's when you feel so strongly about someone's situation, condition, that you take action to help them. That's actionable, but you're willing to risk something. Then it becomes radical empathy. Another way to look at that, this is Maslow's theory of hierarchy. You know, down at the bottom, you've got to eat, you've got to feel safe. And we come up to self-actualization at the top of Maslow. That's where these levels of empathy manifest themselves. Empathy 360 needs to be here. Let me tell you why. I've been talking for, maybe 45 minutes or whatever, and I've talked about the empathy that you need to give to your teachers, your staff, your kids. Absolutely, students. Look down at the bottom. You also need to give empathy to yourself. Take a second and read that, please. There's another presentation that I give that is relevant to this, and I talk about empathy fatigue. Empathy fatigue was a term that originated in the United States in the medical field, and it was applied to nurses and people who were working in critical care units. When children or adults would come in and they were about to die, or they had severe injuries, tragic situations, and these medical professionals, often nurses, took care of these people. Their heart went out to them all the time. And at the end of the week, the day, the year, whatever, these medical people went home and they were just emotionally depleted. They were drained. Often they were having difficulty, excuse me, giving empathy to the people they loved, to their family, because they had given it all at work. And so that's where the term empathy fatigue originated. I've written about that because guess what? Won't surprise you. empathy fatigue also exists in schools. I'll bet you have teachers who give their heart to school, they give their energy, they go home and they are just wasted. They don't have time for the people around them. They don't have the caring. They don't have time or emotional strength to take care of themselves. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're someone who's a wonderful principal. Everybody loves you. You spend your day taking care of everybody else. And guess what? Nobody takes care of you. That's part of the job. I was there. And so what I'm saying here is part of Empathy 360 is recognizing, hold on, I need to take care of myself. I need to give myself time to relax. I need to make a point of not trying to do email for 2 hours every night. I'm going to go out to dinner one night, whatever it is, but think about what you need to. All right, in the chat box, I'm going to stop this here. What I want you to do in the chat box, write a sentence, a phrase, whatever. In the past week, what have you done to take care of yourself? Okay, I'm looking at my chat box. On the WhatsApp, that's a great idea.
Assessment ya hiyo ya kupeleka kwa an employer to be considered.
Rachel, your mute is not on. We can hear you talking.
Mike, maybe you repeat, Thomas, maybe you repeat the question again.
Sure. What in that box? What are you doing to take care of you? Give me a sentence, please, or a phrase. If you haven't done anything, you can write nothing. Ah, excellent. David went out and took a nature walk. Good. I should do more of that. Exercise. Good. Balanced diet. Excellent. I should do more of that too. I'm feeling guilty here. Hike, relaxing, wonderful. Edith, Alice, good for both of you. A whole day. Wow, that's impressive. Applause to Elizabeth. Good food. All right. Daniel, this is wonderful. Peter, these people have got great responses. They're doing a better job of taking care of themselves than I think I did. Couple more and then I'll go back. Home chores, yep. Lucy, you probably felt better after you did that. I hear you. Excellent, Mary. Sharp group, Peter. These folks have got it. Two more, and I'm going to go back to my presentation. Nice. Nice. Joseph, that support is wonderful. Good for you. One more. All right, we're not getting that one more. All right, so I'm coming back here. There it is. Family and parents. Excellent, excellent. Thank you. All right. So we've got to directly teach empathy. You'll hear me, excuse me, talk later about encouraging you to use empathy as a word with your families, with your teachers, And I would suggest your teachers teach empathy to students. Here's a photo of a teacher, students age 8. And as you can see, she's teaching them about empathy. Like everything else, if you want to learn long division, you teach long division. If you want to learn empathy, you teach empathy. How important is empathy? I've been reading a lot, I've been hearing a lot. What I'm hearing is that success in the world, whatever you do, 80% is due to social emotional learning. And leading with empathy is important there. Again, your students need to have the scholastic skills, but who you are is more important than what you know. What our job as educators, whether we're in Asia, Europe, South America, North America, wherever, our job, the Asian islands, is to teach children how to know themselves, work with others, care for other people. This is an example of something we did in our classroom that would be very effective if you want to teach empathy. You can even do it with a staff group. So on the right, these are 7-year-old students. The teachers first asked children, does a feeling look like? And you can see the children generated what it looks like if somebody is bored, angry, happy, excited, sad. What the teachers then did, go to the left, they picked children and they gave the children a card and it had a feeling on it. And the child had to make that feeling with a facial expression. The children around the room sitting on the floor looking at the student didn't know what they were trying to portray. The card might say surprised, unhappy, bored, angry, whatever. And the child in that chair had to express it with a facial expression only. The teacher said this was fascinating. Some of the students on the floor could easily pick up what the children were trying to show. Other children sitting on the floor had no idea. Now, let me tell you, the kids who would age 7 and 8 had no idea. Those children are going to have challenges in life because they're going to be the kind of adults who don't work as well with others as they like. They may well be the kind of adults who get married more than once because they don't have good relationships. What this means is if you're a teacher, and it's whether your children are 7 or 8 or 12 or 17, you can consciously teach students how to understand others, how to have empathy for others. Because when they did this in the classroom, and Sally said, well, I know that Fred is bored because the teacher had Sally explain what it was, how she could see that. So the other children sitting on the floor who were not able to discern that all of a sudden saw what she was realizing. At my school, the New City School, like your school, if children were 7 or 8 years old and were not reading well, we gave them lots of intensive tutoring. We gave them lots of extra work because we knew they needed to catch up. But also at my school, if children were 7 or 8 and they were not good at reading other people's emotions, they were not good at understanding their own emotions, they were not good at expressing empathy, we also worked on that. Because just as a child who at age 8 can't read well has a likely different trajectory, a child who at age 8 can't work well with others also has a likely different trajectory. All right, I'm running late, so I'm not going to stop and have us do that. Sorry. I'll just give you a minute to yourself. Think about this, and this is the kind of thing I'd welcome you sending me an email subsequently. All right, take a second and read that, please. Nothing new. This is what you've heard me say before. All right, how can we grow our empathy? Can we grow our empathy? Absolutely, we can. We grow our empathy by consciously working on relationships. And if I went back 15 minutes, I empathize with you because I don't know you, but I do know you're too busy. I know you don't have enough time. I know you're working too hard, too long. I get that. I did that. And now I, Tom Herr, I'm saying, hey, guess what? You need to consciously work on your relationships. Well, that's hard. Even if you agree with me, even if you want to do it, it takes time and energy. To grow our empathy, to develop our empathy, we need to those are simple things, and I don't know you, but too often I did not do them. Too often I would agree they were important, but I was too busy. Later in my life, later in my career, I kind of awakened. I think it was a much better principle the last 10 years than the first 24, because I all of a sudden began to understand this. Asking again, use the word that's in red. If you believe what I'm saying, if you like it, you need to go back and talk about, use the word empathy. And then the last thing, have courage. I'll revisit that again, but empathy requires courage, because when you ask, you don't always hear what you want to hear. When you ask people, how's it going? When you ask them, how can I help? When you ask them, what's the challenge? Sometimes you hear things that have implications for you that maybe don't feel good to you, but you need to ask. Taking courage, just what I talked about. Those last three bullets you may recognize, they relate directly to my comment earlier when I talked about solving problems, because in successful organizations, in schools, problems aren't solved by just one person. They're solved by the team. Steve Jobs was a genius. He conceptualized the iPhone, right? The Mac computer. But when you study Jobs, he also recognized the importance of people working collaboratively. The Apple headquarters are designed in a way where people come together and chat, from where the restrooms are located to where the soda machines are to where the copiers are. It's a big building, it's circular, and initially people wanted soda machines, lounges throughout the building. Jobs said no. He wanted them in one central place. So whether people had to use the restroom, whether they needed to get a Coke, whether they needed to make copies, they came together and talked. He recognized that as much of a genius as he was, there was power in bringing people together, and their answers were often better than his because they were collective. There was ownership. I can, if I'm the principal, ask you to do something, and you may do it. But if you're going to do it with enthusiasm, if you're going to do it as well as you can, you need to have some ownership. All right, take a second. How positive are you? How negative are you? Think of a number. All right. I've done this before, and I'm going to say to you what I say to people in the United States or in New Zealand or in Dubai, in Singapore, when I do these presentations. Folks, here's the reality. Whatever number you gave yourself, it's too high. We all do that. That's just human nature. All right? This is really, really important. I'm going to talk about a lot of things today. This may be the most important thing I'll talk about, because I'm going to be talking about it vis-a-vis you in your role in a school. But guess what? Everything I say here for the next 5 minutes or whatever, every one of these points applies to you in your personal relationships too. So I'm going to be talking about you in school, but this applies equally to you and your family. It applies to you and your significant others. It applies to you and your children. It applies to you and your friends. All right? So I'm not asking you to put the number in the chat box. All right. I'm going to talk about the rule of 5. There's a man named John Gottman, Gottman. And he's written a lot about relationships. He's a marital counselor. And basically, he says that for any relationship to flourish, and again, I'm not talking about just school work relationships. for any relationship to flourish, Gottman says, you need to have a 5-to-1 relationship of positives. I've got a bank here because basically the way I look at it is you need to make 5 deposits for every withdrawal. That's hard. It's very hard. Why is it hard? 2 reasons. One is, I want you to think about you and your best teacher, your best 2 teachers, or if you want, you and your loved ones or whatever. Human nature is, over time, we take the good things for granted. And over time, we don't take the mistakes for granted. So my wife and I have been married for many years. She does many wonderful things. I don't comment on those because that's just who she is. I expect that. I had a wonderful teacher at school named Chris. She was a great teacher. She always went above and beyond. She knew kids' needs. I never said that to her much because that's who Chris was. But whether it's Chris or whether it's my wife, if they make a mistake, if there's a problem, I did it nicely, but I let them know. So the first reason it's really, really, really hard, human nature, your best teachers, everybody really, you take the good things for granted and you give them feedback, even if you do it well, on the negatives. You might say, that's my job. They need to grow and they need to know what they need to do differently. I get that. I get that. What I'm saying is that not only do they need to hear that, they also need to hear where they're succeeding and where they're doing well. So that's number one. Number one is it's really hard because we take others for granted. That probably doesn't surprise you. The next point, point 2, probably will surprise you. Take a second and think, and again, if we were in the room, I'd have you get together and talk about actions that are seen as positive and actions that are seen as negative. In your mind, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, and I want you to think of 4 or 5 in each list. Okay. And the first thing I said, you take people for granted. Here's the second one. The actions that are positive, that doesn't surprise you. I probably had things like that. The actions that are negative, first, it's a lot longer, but take a look at the list and notice what about this list besides length is different than the positives. All right, here it is. Actions that can be seen as negatives are not only what we do, they're what we did not do. Any positive is something you've done. You said, nice job, you stopped, you looked, you listened, you patted somebody. That's an action you took. That's a positive. But a negative, certainly the things in black. If you give a criticism, if you overlook an achievement, if you're seeming, yeah, that's something you do. But the negatives are also things you did not do. You didn't even do it, but the other person viewed it as a negative. Down at the bottom, I don't know how often happens to you, but the number of times that I'm talking to somebody, there's a group of 2 or 3, and somebody starts checking their phone. They don't think that's a negative, but guess what? That's how I take it. Too often I'm in a hurry and I ask a question, and I don't give the person enough time. Or there's 4 of you in a group and I say, what do you think? And 2 people respond and I say, great, and move on. Well, guess what? The other 2 people probably view that as a negative because I didn't say, Cheryl, what do you think? Or I didn't say, hold on, let me wait. Joyce, what do you think? I'll give you an example of this. It's a teacher named Cheryl. Years ago, I had a teacher named Cheryl, and a phone call came, and a parent called, and she needed to get a message to Cheryl right away. So I wrote down a note. Cheryl wouldn't be looking at her email, so I went down. Cheryl was busy teaching. I went in. She looked up like, what's going on? I handed her the note, and I nodded, and I left. Tom, her, thought, hey, I had a job to do, and I did it. I got her the note. I didn't bother her, didn't disrupt the class. Okay? That was probably at about 2:15 in the afternoon. School ended at 3:30, and about 3:50, I was walking down the hall and I saw Cheryl. She's normally very friendly, and she just kind of looked the other way. And I know her, and I said, Cheryl, what's bothering you? And she said, you walked in my room and you didn't even take the time to look at what I had on that bulletin board. We've talked about how I need to represent more kids. I worked my tail off over the weekend. You didn't even notice. Wow. That's a classic example. I didn't think that was part of my job. It wasn't, but she took it as a what? Negative. So I learned from that. So every other time when I went in a teacher's room, and generally it wasn't to deliver a note, it might be to do an observation or whatever, I always made sure to give some small sign before I left. It might be a thumbs up, it might be a nod, it might be an okay, but before I left the room, I gave them some sign that, hey, things were good. Now, I might give them a thumbs up and then later say, when we met, wow, I really liked how in the lesson you did a good job of asking deeper questions. Tell me, though, about those boys in the back. They seem not too interested. So what I'm saying here doesn't mean it's all positive, not at all. But it means we need to be very thoughtful, very careful about the positives, negatives, and the ratio. Tom, her have worked at this probably 20 years, maybe longer. I am not at 5 to 1. But whatever I was when I began, I'm higher. You know, maybe when I began, I was 2 to 1, 2.2 to 1, who knows? But because I'm now aware of that, I make a point of not taking things that people do that are good for granted. And I also try to be aware of times when I don't say something or I don't interact when it can be perceived as a negative. Not easy. That's what I said. Take a second, look at that. Positives, negatives, same thing. Going back to Google and what they found. Whether it's one-to-one, you individually to somebody, whether it's part of a group, we need to do that. By the way, I also talked with my teachers about this. I don't know how you do parent-teacher conferences, but we would meet with our students' parents. And it's natural for teachers who are worried about kids to begin by talking about what the child needs to do differently, where she's falling behind, where he is deficient. Those things need to be shared. But if you want a teacher to listen, if you want a parent to listen, if you want them to understand, you need to begin by talking about something that's a positive. That's also true for you when you meet with teachers, whether it's after an observation, whether it's an end of your evaluation or whatever. 5 to 1 may not be realistic, but striving to 5 to 1 may get you to 3 to 1. All right, optional homework. I hope this resonated with you. If it did, here's what I'd like you to do. Talk about that 5 to 1 ratio with somebody who matters to you. It might be somebody at work. It might be somebody in your home. It might be both. And this isn't something that you can do by yourself. It can, but it's more effective if they say, wow, good idea. Let's try to do that. The other thing, when I talk about transparency, after I read about this and decided to do this with my faculty, I told them about that. I said, let me tell you about this article I've read And I talked about it initially with them for them working toward a 5-to-1 with their students. They all got that. Nobody questioned that. They all saw the merit. And then I said, but, I need to work on that 5-to-1 with you. By saying it out loud, by saying it transparently, I was making myself accountable. And I said, and I want you to work on that with one another. So I talked about that frequently, often at faculty meetings, not everyone, but when we'd have a staff meeting, I'd say, how are you coming on the 5-to-1? I'd ask people about that. I kept that in their mind. Courage again. Let me talk about mistakes. This is another way that you can use your empathy. My guess is if I gave you a true-false test and I said mistakes are bad, true or false, you'd all say true. I'd say true. Of course, mistakes are bad. Part of our educational goal is so that kids don't make mistakes. We don't want teachers to make mistakes, and for sure, we don't want to make mistakes. Well, it's not that simple. Not that simple. We need to view mistakes through the virtue of forgiveness and as opportunities to learn and as occasions to show care. All right. So I want you to think about the kinds of mistakes. Typically, we only think about old mistakes. Well, you're right. If you're making the same mistake over and over again, if you've got that's not good. If you're working for me and you're making the same mistake over and over again, we're going to have some difficult discussions and I may not renew your contract. Making the same mistake over and over again is dumb, right? No question. But here's a but. Check this out. It is not smart to make no mistakes. Let me say that again. It's not smart to make no mistakes. Too often, I'm speaking specifically to teachers, because I've had teachers like this who work for me. Too often I will have wonderful teachers, great teachers, they've got lots of experience, and they get into a routine and they do the same thing all the time. Well, guess what? Kids change, the world changes. That's not good. If you're not making any mistakes, that means you're not learning. You've got a process, it's working, but guess what? It's not going to work forever. You're not learning. So no mistakes is not smart. What is smart? New mistakes. I would talk with my faculty about this. I want you making some mistakes. I want you making new mistakes. And that's when you try something because you know you're going to learn from it. With some of my more senior, excellent teachers, maybe I had a staff of about 42, 44, so maybe 20%, maybe 8 or 10 of them, they were so good, and I would still observe them, and I would say, Mary, I'm going to come to your class next Tuesday. Here's what I want. I want you to try something new. I want you to make some mistakes. And she'd look at me like, what? And I'd say, no. I know you're an excellent teacher. I've seen you over the years, but I want you to get out of your groove. Try something new. It's probably going to be a mistake, and that's okay. Because when we meet to talk about that, I'm going to ask, what did you learn from your new mistake? Now, folks, this is not easy. So much of our world, certainly in the US, certainly in Africa, people don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to be criticized. I get that. But new mistakes are a different kind. New mistakes are those that you make because you learn from them. The next thing I'm going to talk with you about, gratitude. It's a little thing that offers a big payoff. All right. Take a second and just think about that. I ask this question in the graduate classes I teach at the University of Missouri St. Louis. I teach classes for students who are either working on a master's degree or a doctorate. Excuse me. Typically, the master's degree students are currently teachers. They're pursuing being a principal. The doctoral degree students often are already administrators, but they're looking for a higher position. So I'll ask them that question. And almost inevitably, everybody kind of rolls their eyes guiltily. We're busy. We're busy. Often, usually, most of the time, what people will say is, yeah, you know, I had it in my head, I had it in my heart, but I just didn't bother writing a thank you note. Now, I'm talking about thank you notes, not just thank yous. Thank you notes are important. And again, if I was in a room with you, I would say, raise your hand if you wrote a thank you note to somebody, not an email, a thank you note within the past week, within the past month. I don't know you, but when I do this at the university, hardly anybody raises a hand. That 5-to-1 ratio played out. People are pretty good about saying, nice job, Margaret, Rachel, thank you, Lena, excellent. They're also pretty good about emails, thanking email, but writing a written thank you note just does not happen. I occasionally, Tom Herr, somebody will write a thank you note to Dr. Herr, and I got to tell you, it makes my day. Whether it's put in my mailbox, whether it comes in the mail, the fact that somebody took the thought and time to write a thank you note really resonates with me. Now, I read about this, talked about it with my faculty, and we all agreed that this was something we needed to do better at. So what I'm doing now is I'm modeling for you in the sense that this recording or this presentation is recording. You can look at it later. You can send me an email. What I'm hoping is that this is one of these things that you think, wow, that's a low cost. It's a big buck, big bang. I'm going to talk about it with my faculty. I did that, and we came up with some ideas for expressing gratitude. First, at your learning meetings, you should talk about using empathy and gratitude a lot. Again, transparency, talk about why we're doing it. By the way, the top line there says learning meetings. There's a principal, Kim Belanco, in the state of Washington. And I learned from her once, was asking her a question, and she said, well, at last week's learning meeting. And I said, what's a learning meeting? And she said, well, those are our staff meetings, but we don't call them staff meetings. We call them learning meetings, because by calling them a learning meeting, that tells everybody that we're coming together to learn. She said, as the principal, that means I cannot just read to people. I cannot just hand them something. My job as the principal is to make sure that this is a learning environment. I thought, wow, that's really good. So to you at your school, if you buy into this, you want to use empathy and gratitude often. What I would do is, if you really buy into this, go to 2 or 3 of your trusted teachers, and you say to them, hey, at our next learning meeting, at our next staff meeting, I'm going to talk about appreciation, about gratitude, and I'm going to ask for people to just stand up and volunteer sometime when they've thanked somebody lately, or maybe written a handwritten note. Would you be willing to raise your hand and let me call on you? Because if you just do that, I don't know your faculty. If I just did that with my faculty, nobody would say anything. They've done it, but they just wouldn't do it. So by me saying ahead of time, will you do that? So I'd say, all right, folks, gratitude's really important. We need to do a better job of showing appreciation, not just to one another, but to our students' parents, to our kids, to us. So I'd like to have that be a focus for us during the school year. And I'm curious, I'd like for a few people to begin. Some folks have kind of volunteered. Would you share recently when you expressed appreciation and to whom? And these people would get, that set the tone. And if I said to people, okay, I've heard from 3 of you today, we're going to be doing this at every meeting. every meeting for the rest of the year, we're going to begin with 3 people sharing. 2 things happened. One, that set the tone, it let people know that this was valuable. The other, people came to me and they said, wow, Tom, that's really interesting. Now that I know this is something to look for, you're going to be asking, I find myself, Lucy, I find myself looking more to see the times when I can thank other people and express appreciation. Carla came to me and said, you know this is what you hoped happened, but it's happened with me. I find myself saying thank you more often, nice job, more frequently than I used to, because I know we're going to be talking about this at the next staff meeting. So that's a little thing that can have a big, big difference. The other thing you can do to get into it, to get everybody into it, is you talk about what's important the way I did. In a couple slides, maybe the next one, I've got some paragraphs that I've written. If you send me an email, I can send those to you, or you can get it from the video. So it might be the kind of thing you share with your faculty, whether you do it, whether you have written bulletins, whether you do it on a screen or whatever. So they kind of know, and then you come in, and instead of having 20 or 30 or however many it is, listen to 2 or 3 each time, which is good. You could also say, one of the things that helps build a culture of empathy, that helps remind us that we care for one another, that helps increase our caring for one another, is that when we take the time to express appreciation. So what I'd like you to do right now, you're all sitting here, I'm going to give you 60 seconds. I'm going to start my watch. Turn to your neighbors, groups of 2 or 3, no more than 3, so that everybody participates, and just go ahead and talk about when you've thanked somebody lately at school and for what. I've done that, folks. I got to tell you, it is wonderful. All of a sudden, everybody starts talking. There's a buzz. Often when I do this after my 60 seconds, I have trouble getting people to stop. Well, that's a nice problem because they're busy sharing and talking with one another. And again, having done that, they're more likely then between now and the next meeting to take a point to say, to do that to somebody else. Again, it's a little thing that's really a big thing. Gratitude tag. That's another thing you can do. You've got your staff meeting, your learning meeting, you talk about this, and you say, today, instead of having you all turn and talk with one another, we're going to do gratitude tag. So I'm going to call on somebody. So I'm going to call, and I'm going to begin with Alice. And after Alice finishes sharing with all of us, a person for whom she feels appreciation and gratitude, Alice will then call on somebody else, and then they'll call on somebody else, and they'll call on somebody else. We'll do this 4 or 5 times. All this is simply a list of different strategies of different ways that you can work on gratitude with your faculty. The last one I did, and it was incredibly powerful. I began talking with my faculty about gratitude and appreciation. We had monthly meetings, and I think I probably began this in maybe November. So we talked about it, for 2 or 3 months. They knew that. And then I think it was March or April, they came into the meeting. And in the meeting, what I had was a box of stationery, blank paper and envelopes and pens. And I said, as you come in, take a piece of paper and a pen and an envelope. People are looking at me like, what's going on? And I talked about the fact, as I have with you, that gratitude is wonderful, appreciation is important. Getting a handwritten note is just remarkable. So I asked people, I said, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Think of somebody who warrants appreciation, who wants a thank you note. And go ahead and write it and seal the envelope. If it's somebody here at school, just give them to me. There's a box here. I don't need to say to whom they're going. And tomorrow morning, I'll distribute them. If it's somebody outside the school, we will pay for the postage. So I did that twice a year, I think. Well, I got to tell you, I know it was effective because we did that. And during the school year, teachers would come up to me and say, wow, I got to tell you what happened here. I wrote a thank you note too, and they came back and they talked about how the interactions change. Inevitably, the pace of the world is too great, whether it's in Africa or the United States. Inevitably, we know people do good things, and we appreciate them. We just don't take the time to thank them. And this changed the formula. The other thing I've done, and in my new book that's coming out in February or March, I talk about this in here. For the past several years, I've been really big on gratitude and appreciation. And I want to inculcate that in the staff members who take the classes from me at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. So I don't know if you use Canvas, if that's a tool that you all use. That's an online instrument on which I assign homework. So we meet on Monday night. My class is Monday night, 5:30 to 8 o'clock, and it's all through Zoom. And then after that, they have assignments, and I typically give them 2 or 3 articles to read and react. And then I'll often ask an open-ended question to which they need to respond. And I read that, and then I write the response back to them. And then they get on and they can read that. Well, the first 3 weeks of school, one of their assignments is they have to write 3 handwritten letters of thanks and distribute them to people. And the assignment that they have to do for me, I don't ask to whom they went or what it was about. I just ask them to give me the time when they did it. And so their assignment, they might say Thursday at 1:12, Friday at or whatever. So we do this for 3 weeks. I stop. The semester is basically 16 weeks long. And then the last 2, we do it again. And I say to my students, I'm doing this because I want it to be a habit. I don't want you to do it because you're in Dr. Herr's class. I want you to do it because you know how it makes other people feel and how it makes you feel. Because in class, we would then talk about, hey, did you get any feedback? How'd you feel? It was amazing. Sometimes people heard from the person to whom they wrote the note. Whether or not they did, always, and always is a strong word, always, they talked about how they felt in writing it. There, did that. Here we go. This is from a blog. Let me let you read that I wrote. I always like my writing, but that last paragraph, what I really like is going beyond the usual. Commend the cafeteria worker who always smiles. Acknowledge the colleague who never gives up. If you, after today, if you say, well, you know, my goal, I'm too busy, but my goal is every day before I go home, I'm going to write 3 thank you notes to people who are on the staff. Or even if you said every day before I go home, I'm going to write whatever. That's the kind of thing you need to do to build a habit. When I was asking you what you did to take care of yourselves, people gave great responses. Tom Herr, have just started going to the gym regularly, and I'm making it a habit. And what I have found is that when it becomes a habit, it's easier for me to do it, because if I don't do it, I feel like, well, that's not right. If you could get into the habit of writing thank you notes, and while I'm sitting here telling you handwritten thank you notes are golden, they are, paragraph, however, comma, if in your world you can do 3 email thank you notes a day, guess what? That's wonderful. I don't know you, I don't know your relationship with your faculty, but if you can develop the habit, and email is a whole lot easier, if you can develop the habit of writing 1, 2, or 3 every day, it changes things. First of all, you begin looking and thinking, gosh, who warrants a thank you note? And then maybe you think, wow, you know, I've done this for 2 weeks and I haven't sent a thank you note to Mark. That causes you, A, to be inclusive. Who are all the people? but it also causes you to be specific. What about this person? Chances are, if you haven't written a thank you note to that person, maybe you're not aware. Everybody deserves a thank you for something. So that's a win-win. Then the last thing on this is that as you write thank you notes to other people, as you thank them more often, guess what? It reciprocates. They're more likely to come back to you. Take that last sentence and read it again. Process is important. We should focus on folks' efforts and trajectory, not just applaud their achievements. All right, so I'm now going to stop and I'm going to do a share here. So you've heard me talking about this. Write down the initials or the name. I see your numbers. Good, 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 good. Excellent, excellent. Write down either the initials or the name of somebody who warrants a thank you note. Actually, somebody to whom you're going to write a thank you note. I'm now giving you that assignment. Today, within the next 2 or 3 days, I want you to write a thank you note. Give me the initials or the name, either one of who that is. If you want to add why, that's great. But all I really want is the initials of the name. Thank you, Frederick. Yep, Mary, yep, yep. Okay, Beatrice, thank you. Love it, love it. Okay. Good. See, it makes me smile just to envision you thanking these people. Excellent, Bernadette. Yep, yep, yep. Wait about 30 more seconds, so get your initials in there. And Peter, I'm taking longer, so probably around about 9 minutes. We may not have much time for question, but I want to go through some things. Okay, anybody else give me initials? Okay, thank you. Thank you, David. All right. Now, remember a few slides ago when I was talking about the 5 to 1? And I said your optional homework assignment is that I would really like you to talk about the 5 to 1 with somebody at work, somebody at home. Here's another optional homework assignment. And on this one, if you want, also optional, I'd love you to send me an email. If you send this thank you note, and again, ideally paper, but an email, if you say something, whatever, what I'd love you to do is send me an email and say, hey, I sent something, how you felt, how it made you feel. I'm over here in the middle of the United States, but it will make my day to know that you're doing this and to know how you feel. This is the kind of thing, remember the slide I said, it's a little thing with a big effort. If you can get into the habit of doing this, and if you can get into the habit of that 5 to 1, these do not cost you, it doesn't cost money. It costs energy, costs time, but the payoff is really, really there. All right. Here's a question for you. I will bet I will bet that each one of you at some point, a problem landed on your chest, on your desk, and somebody knew about it and they hadn't told you. And they didn't do it out of malice, hadn't told you. So what I'm going to talk about now is going to be very difficult, very hard. Not difficult, hard. It's hard for me. Years ago, there was a group of parents who were quite upset about the curriculum issue in one of our grades. And when I found out about it, 3 of the parents came to see me together, kind of as a group in force, and they wanted me to change things. And I responded and I listened, and I was really caught off guard. And I went to the teachers, the one teacher who's the lead teacher, and she said, "Oh yeah, I knew about that. I'm sorry." And I said, "If you knew about that, why didn't you tell me?" And this is a teacher who valued me, who cared about me. And she said, "Oh, you were so busy, I didn't want to bother you." Well, guess what? You're already where I am. I wish I had been bothered, right? This is a good example of people like you, people like me. We are busy. People know that. And although this is not our intent, sometimes it is harder for them to approach us. So what I've talked about, consciously work to look not busy so that you are approachable. And I got to tell you, this is hard for me. Because I always felt if I was being leisurely, people would think, why isn't he working? Doesn't Dr. Herr have something to do? So again, transparency. I talked about this with my staff. I said to them, a problem came up 2 weeks ago. Teachers who are wonderful teachers who care about me hadn't told me because I thought I was too busy. That wasn't good for me. So I said to them, I understand how I can come across. I am busy, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to make a point of after school, a couple times a day, I'm going to be just hanging around, sitting on the bench outside the office, or I may come in the lounge. Trust me, it's not that I don't have things to do, but I want to do that so that you feel comfortable saying, "Oh, Dr. Herr, you might know about, or have you heard from, or so-and-so is unhappy." I got to tell you, 5 to 1, make new mistakes, thank you notes, those are easier to me than this. But this is really, really important. All right, the last thing, I'm going to use place. I'm going to do this quickly. Place is a component of school culture. A man named John Coleman wrote about it. He talks about the 6 components of school culture. Organizational culture, not just schools. He talks about vision, values, people, practices, narrative, and place. Vision, values, people, practice, narrative, and place. I wrote about this, if this interests you, in my book, Taking Social Emotional Learning School-Wide. You probably get it from the library. You don't need to buy it. I've got a chapter on each one. And one of the things I say is that place is what we overlook. Don't know your schools. I'd love to visit. Haven't been there. Typically in schools in the United States, the halls are pretty barren. There's not much up. In elementary schools, there tends to be more stuff than in secondary schools and in high schools. When there's kids work up, it typically is the kids who are doing well, not everybody. So I'm going to show you very quickly some photos I've taken from visiting schools. These are schools, my book, The Formative 5, for talking about empathy. You can see those. The bottom right, empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes. There's actually shoes hanging. This is a school, secondary school for girls, and they've got their goals. Goal 2, respect for intellectual values. Goal 3, social awareness, which impels action. The goals are great. What's powerful here, they took photos of actual students pursuing these goals. And every year they change them. So the girls who are walking down the hall see themselves in the photo. This is from another school. They had their virtue, self-control, had the kids pose, took a photo. Ways to show empathy, again, in the hall. Here you can see, this is from a classroom. These are big pieces of paper. Formative 5 from my book. Teachers asked empathy, they asked about self-control. The kids generated responses, and then they took photos, put them up there. Here's from another school. They talk about the virtues, curiosity, integrity, gratitude, da 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 da. When kids are doing that, when an adult sees them, not just a teacher, any adult, they commend the kid, give them that slip, express what he or she did, circle it, and then the kid, it goes up on a bulletin board. So those are hanging in the hall. Here's another one from another school. I was kind when children fill it out. We can also use the halls to talk about staff collegiality and empathy. Collegiality is people learning with and from one another. So here you can see this is a staff, a school, and every one of these is a picture of a staff member. And below it, or in the picture rather, the person is holding a sign where they've written the name of a champion for them. So this is a great way to say to the adults, who's your champion? And those are champions from within the school. It's a little like thank yous. Terrific teammates, different school, same way. They asked teachers, administrators, everybody, who's a teammate. They wrote them up, put them down there. And again, that's in the hall for kids to see. Courage again. We need to use wisdom and leadership. Take a second and look at that. And I have that because it's got the cognitive, the emotional, ethical, relational. So it's got values, social, emotional learning, intellectual, and it comes in wisdom. As we all know, problems aren't solved by the smartest people. They're solved by the people who have the most wisdom. And part of that wisdom is using other people around you. Part of that wisdom is controlling your emotions. All right, in a second, I'm going to ask you to write on the side one takeaway. Before I do that, if you want to take a photo of that, if that's easier for you, that's my email, that's my website. You can get it if you don't take it there, if you don't take it here, because I really would like to hear from you. Leadership is about relationships. There's me with some of my staff members. And here's the question. I gave you a whole lot of stuff today. Again, this was basically a 3-hour or an all-day workshop. So I apologize if I overwhelmed you. What I want you to do is think of one thing that you want to do. One thing. I'm going to stop this. I want you to put it in the chat box. We'll give you a few minutes, and then I'll turn it over to Peter. And thank you for listening to me. So what's your one thing you learned, one thing you're going to do? I'm stopping and sharing, and we will put it in the chat box. Lots of thank yous. Thank you. Your one takeaway. Bernadette, excellent. That's hard. Good for you, Bernadette. Yeah. Excellent. Oh, wow, wow. It excites me to see this. This is really fun. I mean, like you, I've got more to do than time allows, but being here today and reading this just makes me feel so good. Yes. Good for you, Peter. Yep. All right, after the next person, I'm gonna turn it back to Peter because I've gone over a few minutes and it's late where you all are. The last thing you need is to be here longer. Excellent. Good, good, good. Yes. I feel like I gave you all a test and you all got an A. Yes. All right, Peter, let me turn it back to you. I got to tell you folks, thank you all for listening. It's really exciting to me to work with educators who are so interested in doing the right things for the kids, their staff, and themselves. Peter.
So thank you very much, Dr. Thomas, for sharing your wisdom and expertise on empathy with us. Educators and school leaders, you agree with me, that was a very educative and insightful presentation. We have learned a lot, and I would say, like, it's like usual, this was extraordinary knowledge sharing. And you have, if I have to summarize, you have really informed us. We are very informed that we need to be the CEO, the Chief Empathy Officer, by developing empathy, um, or by giving empathy to everyone. We need to give empathy to our students. We need to give empathy to members of staff in our staff rooms, and we need to give empathy to ourselves. And the educators and school leaders who are attending tonight's session, you agree with me that when you look at the teacher induction, mentorship, and one,
Some of you will, I hope some of you will send me. I'm sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Yes, Thomas.
I said, I hope some of you will send me emails with what you've done. I would love to hear that.
Yeah, so I was saying that we were aligned with the TMEC guidelines. And even as we work hard to institutionalize mentorship and coaching within our education settings, I think the mentors need to have empathy, and the mentees too, they need to have empathy. And considering that most of us in this session, we are all school leaders in our own capacities, be it in comprehensive schools or in senior schools, we really need to make sure that we give empathy 360 degrees. So I think that is a challenge to each of us. We have families, we have many responsibilities, we have schools on our shoulders. But we need to give empathy to everyone within our school communities. And again, the rule of 5-1 rule on positive and negative. I think that's a great takeaway, because sometimes we tend to focus more on the negative interactions, and we fail to put a lot of emphasis on positive interactions. So we really need to reevaluate ourselves and see what we are doing well and what we are doing badly. But Thomas, you have really encouraged us that we really have to practice gratitude and practice empathy, and to make it more explicit when we are having our learning meetings or staff meetings. Let us, all of us, internalize, model, and practice empathy and gratitude. I know time has so far much gone, but I would like also to recognize the representative of Kesha in this meeting. I know Madam Beatrice, she's joining from Mombasa in the Kesha conference. I would like to invite her briefly to share an opening remarks. She's a representative of the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association. So please, Madam Beatrice Otieno, if you're hearing us from Mombasa, this is your time.
Sure.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Good evening, all.
Evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I was able to join in almost throughout. I'm in Mombasa for our conference. Very nice weather, but also to Tom, that was very insightful, very incisive, and very, very relevant to know both, as leaders and also applying empathy as the leaders. I think I've learned so much. And I think when we get back after halftime, especially coming at a time when schools in Kenya are undergoing so much unrest, I think this would be very, very relevant to us. And I appreciate all of us for joining in, even amidst the busy period. And Dr. Kingori, we appreciate your leadership in this and all the other facilitators, and we look forward to more sessions. But I must say, this was one of the best. And we also thank God for enabling us to get time. Some of us are so busy, but we're able to get time. Tom, this was worth it. And I really thank all of us, and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madam Beatrice, for your kind words. So as we wind up, I like also to recognize we have a team. I know school principals are joining from several parts of our country.
Yes.
I'd like to ask Madam Mwasero to say a few words as we close. Mwasero from Boy, she's a representative from TSC. Here with us. If she's not there, I will just, because for the interest of time, we'll conclude and thank every head of institution, every school principal who have managed to attend our coaching and mentorship session tonight. Feel much appreciated. Our next session will be held in July 23rd. Please note on your diary, our next session will be held on July 23rd. And we are going to share the notes through the emails, but we're also asking you kindly for ECL of coordination and sharing the links for the meeting. You can join our virtual community of practice. This is a WhatsApp group where I'll be able to interact with other fellow leaders who are attending this virtual coaching and mentorship speaker series. For the interest of time, thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll wind up with a word of prayer. So I'll ask one volunteer to pray for us. It's night here in Kenya. I know in America it's still in the afternoon. So we'll just have one volunteer to say a word of prayer. A volunteer, please. I know you had so many questions. If you have a question, I think the best thing, Tom has shared the email address. You can send a direct question to Tom. You can also send to us through the email address. We'll make sure that we'll be able to respond to your questions. Otherwise, thank you. So a volunteer to lead us with a word of prayer. Anyone would like to pray for us?
Hello?
Yes. Yes, Mwanamisi, yes.
I'll just wish to say that my microphone was disadvantaging me when you wanted me to say something. But again,
Yes.
wish to appreciate everyone for this. And that we are praying. I just wish to pray that God gives us the grace and gives us the togetherness so that we are able to take home this what we have learned. We thank God for having given us this opportunity to be together in this meeting, and we continue praying that God guides us so that we can be able to support we have been given a lot in the empathy line so that we can be able to support our teachers, our learners. And generally, it is not only the teachers and the learners, even the parents who bring in the children. With those, I wish to say thank you and may God bless every one of you.
Thank you so much. We'll end up with that word. May the Lord bless you and be with you. Thank you so much.
Amen.
Amen. Bye-bye.
Amen. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.